Okay, coming to the final point, developing open source models, which is also my concluding slide. As you know, I've been developing a lot of open source frameworks over the time. And what I can recommend is to focus on the user experience. So what does your user want to build with your framework? Sadly, you see a lot of open source frameworks that are not built for the user, but maybe just built for the person itself, or built for an experienced user, or just built to reproduce some numbers in a paper. And the test I put out is like, really, okay, I want your framework so simple that you can explain me the framework when we're drunk at a bar with just pen and paper, with a pen and paper on a beer mat. So can I just bump into you at a bar and ask you, hey, how does this framework works? And that's like my guiding principle. So for example, Easy NMT, it's a framework to do machine translation, which I developed, I don't know, a few years ago to simplify machine translation. It's kind of easy. So first you run pip install easy nmt, then you do import it, load the model, and you call translate and say, what's the language? And that's pretty much all the code you need. And now you can start to machine translation and do what the user wants, to translate text from one language to another language. Also, you should heavily focus on documentation. I really think that's what successful open source projects sets apart from unsuccessful open source projects. Really focus on documentation. Documentation is way more critical than the code itself and the code architecture, software architecture beneath the library. So really invest heavily on the documentation, and here start easy. So start with an example like this. So here, take a sentence, translate it to German. And then over time, you can build up complexity, say, okay, this is also what you can do. And this is like different sentence splitting and language identification and so on and so on and so on. But really start easy. Finally, if you want that other people contribute to your open source library, aim for like simple code or software architecture. To make it like really simple for people, outside people, to understand your architecture, to contribute to your code. So don't use all the fancy technologies from object-oriented programming with a lot of abstractions and decorator, and spread your code across 1,000 classes. So don't have like really fancy complex software architecture. But I found it really good if the software architecture is easy. You can just look at the code, see how does it work, even if you're just a beginner in the world of programming. Yeah, that's so much from my side. Thanks for listening, and looking forward to your questions and also questions from Jay.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nils. I'd love to remind everybody who is either watching this on YouTube or live, we have the thread in the Discord. That's the right place for questions, and we can, answer them as they come in and after the session as well. So I'd love to direct you there. Yeah, thank you so much, Nils. That was a great sort of run over, a lot of the different topics that we on this last slide. I'm really curious to hear more from you about your experience sort of running Sentence-BERT. So it's this research project and it's code that you've launched, but then it succeeded and it took a life of its own. Curious to hear from you sort of, what are the benefits? What are the insights that you get as let's say, a maintainer of a popular open source package like Sentence Transformers, but also what are the challenges?
Yeah. So yeah, first I would say it's the Sentence Transformer library is a bit different than to a lot of libraries you see people publish with their code. So often what you see with a lot of frameworks is that they publish the code just with the aim to reproduce the experiments in the paper, to say, okay, this is the table we have, and here's like the few lines of code you can run to reproduce the numbers. but people do not really care about the numbers. So they do not really care about scores on this one benchmark, like blue benchmark. What they care about, like, okay, I want to take this and build my own thing. And here, sentence transformer library is different. You can't take the sentence transformer library to reproduce the results from the Sentence-BERT. There are like some models available where you can reproduce the numbers, but because it's an actively maintained library, always up to date, also up to date with the newest HuggingFace transformer library, there has been like a lot of changes and you cannot really reproduce the results, but still it's focused on the user experience. So people are not really interested to take this and reproduce this one number in this one table, but they are interested to run it on like topic modeling to see what are the topics in the document. So benefit here is like if you publish the code, there's like not really a way how you can betray. So totally with this jelly beans, you can just run a lot of tests, a lot of ablation, hyperparameter tuning, and then you find like a setting which works well. But if you put out the model so that other people should use it, it has to provide value to them. So if your model just works for this one setting and will not work for anyone else and provides no value for other people, and people will not use it. So my goal was always not to publish a paper and get like this bold line and claim this is a cool new model, but really put out models that are useful and that are easy to use for other people's. Okay. Second insight I get is like a lot of sense from what other challenges people have in the field. So number one question I got a long time is like multilingual embeddings. How can I get embeddings for other languages than English? Where at that, like 2 years ago, I said, okay, there's like no good way how you can get sentence embeddings for other languages. And there are no good models available and methods available. So I started research to do this. Solved this was like a paper presented 2 years ago at NLP on sentence level, not paragraph level. Then second question was like out of domain generalization. Like people say, hey, my system doesn't work well for legal domain or fashion industry. What can I do? And so that's where I started the BEIR benchmark, say, okay, first I wanted to have numbers on it and then investigate ways how you can adapt these models to other domains. Challenges is, yeah, it's time consuming. So if you put it out and you interact with the community and answer questions and pull requests and try to troubleshoot things, it takes away time you could spend on like research, creating new papers, building new things. So there you have to find like the right balance for that.